Hi there, and welcome to the US Web Design System monthly call for November 2020. My name is Dan Williams, and I'm the US Web Design System product lead. Thanks for being here. We've got a few announcements and updates to kick things off. And then we'll dig into some important work we've been doing over the last month or so that will influence the short and long-term future of the design system. First, I'd like to mention that we're recording this monthly call, like all of our monthly calls. And as always, we post these recordings to YouTube. So please refrain from turning on your camera. We'll manually turn off any cameras to ensure the recording doesn't show us on camera out there on the YouTube. We'll be posting links and references into the chat as we go along, and you're encouraged to ask questions in the chat at any time. If any member of our team can answer your question in the chat, we'll do so. Otherwise, there'll be some time for question and answer at the end of the hour. Also, be sure to introduce yourself in the chat as well. It's nice to know who's here. It's good to have you here today. And with that, let's get started. I thought, last month was a busy month, but this one's been something else entirely. So let's get into it. To start things off, we've got a bunch of great new site launches. And then I'll give some updates on the USWDS 2.10 beta and why you haven't heard anything about it recently. I'd also like to talk a little bit about our semi-public components site, components.designsystem.digital.gov. And if you've never heard of it, pretend you never heard about it today either, because it went away yesterday. And then a colleague of mine, Natalie Kurz, will join me to talk about an important research project we've undertaken over the last month and what it means for the future of the design system. We'll talk about her team's research, and then we should have some time for Q&A. So without any further ado, let's jump into site launches. First up, accessboard.gov, the US Access Board, an independent federal agency that promotes equality for people with disabilities. Congratulations to a good friend of the design system on their newly launched site. Good work, Access Board. And another cool site, nano.gov, the National Nanotechnology Initiative. Pretty cool. And the very relevant pandemicoversight.gov, which is the website of the Pandemic Response Accountability Committee, a committee of the Council of the Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency. Also a nice new site from OFIA.gov, the Office of Financial Institution Adjudication, an interagency group of administrative law judges. It's nice to see that one. And finally, nga.mil, the website of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. Lots of good and interesting stuff coming up over this last month. Great work, everyone. And if you have a project you'd like featured at a monthly call, give a shout out now in the chat or anytime on the public Slack, and we'll include it in the monthly roundup. Now, let's jump into some product updates, specifically the USWDS 2.10 beta. Well, so, things kind of didn't go as planned over the last month for a number of reasons, some of which we'll visit later in the call. We sort of shifted our focus away from that work temporarily. Now, this is just sort of a temporary pause on this work toward the 2.10 beta. And beta releases will start coming out again soon. And the final release will be on track for the end of the year or the start of 2021. And Like by the time it comes out, it will likely be the release of at least USWDS 2.11 instead of USWDS 2.10. As you'll hear, there'll be at least one new design system release before that beta comes out. So stay tuned. We're still working toward a new component library, new theme color guidance, improved settings, better code organization in the project. All of that is still very much underway. It's just going to take a little bit longer. Next, components. .designsystem.digital.gov. The URL so long it just barely fits in the slide deck. If you've never heard of it, it's because it's not something we really publicize. It was mostly an internal use component library that we're always using for developing new work and documenting it before it moves over to our main site, designsystem.digital.gov. So now, as of yesterday, we've decommissioned that site. Components.designsystem.digital.gov now redirects to designsystem.digital.gov/components. Why'd we do that? This site was generated by our component library software, and to be honest, it was a bit of an accessibility mess. We didn't really want to maintain a public site that we barely wanted to be public anyway, and one that was an accessibility liability to boot. It was also something of shadow documentation, mostly a duplication of the functionality and guidance that we provide on our main website. So if you had heard about it, or if you did use it, it was because it served as the only documentation for some otherwise undocumented components, like, shockingly enough to me, Hero, Graphic List, and SkipNav. There's really no reason these components shouldn't be on our actual website with accompanying documentation. Just having them hanging out on this other site in sort of a limbo area wasn't really working. It wasn't a great sustainable solution. So we're moving all of those components that were only on components.designsystem over to the main site. We want our website, not some other site, to be the clear canonical source for our principles, guidance, and code. And that's where we're going to be spending our development time moving forward. So we're working on getting those components sort of documented and up on designsystem.digital.gov. That'll probably be coming within a month or so. But if you used components, if you use that components library site, you're going to have to start moving over to the regular website, and we're going to have to start moving over to the regular website too, and not rely on that site to do the lift for some things. So goodbye, components.designsystem.digital.gov. So, after two kind of like bummer updates, one little ray of sunshine, we're releasing new Sketch and Adobe XD design assets. In fact, not only are we releasing them, but we released them. They are out and up. This brings them up to feature parity with the code base, adding identifier, time picker, and step indicator, all the things from USWDS 2.9.0. as well as incorporating new sketch color variables into the sketch library, which is awesome. And I'm so happy to begin to use those color variables. I use them all the time since incorporating them, and I hope you will appreciate them as well. If you're a designer who uses these assets, visit designsystem.digital.gov/documentation/designers or our USWDS for Designers repo to pick up these new versions. I realize I should have called out some of these links to be included in the chat, but we can get them up. We can get them up later, I think. So that is out, and now we can move on to something new. We can talk about what's next for the design system. So over the last month, we were fortunate enough to get some resources that have helped us launch really like the biggest research and development project we've really worked on since the launch of the design system itself. Now, we know that the biggest priority for many teams over the last year has been emergency response related to the COVID-19 pandemic. These teams have done important work in a difficult situation, and as a project that supports design and development teams across the federal government, it was important for us to listen and learn how the design system was or was not useful during this time, so we can make necessary improvements going forward. So joining me to talk about what we've done and what we've learned, I'd like to introduce Natalie Kurz. She's a contractor on this research team, one of a very talented and hardworking group we've been calling the USWDS Accelerator Team. Hey, Natalie.
Hey, Dan. Thanks for asking me to join. I'm really excited to chat today, actually, and share the amazing work that our team is doing. Over the last 20 years or so, I've worked on a lot of design systems, specifically one at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is actually based on USWDS. So I got a little bit of exposure to it prior to coming onto this project. And I think this kind of work is so much potential for improving customer experience overall. So really excited to get to dig in.
Great. Thanks, Natalie. So I'm going to jump into the slides. And with Natalie's help, we can walk through some of our initial findings and activities. So, all right, here we go. So we undertook an ambitious research initiative focused on understanding emergency response needs and improving how USWDS supports federal government teams. During times of crisis, individuals turn to the government for assistance. For example, consider this relatively real but sort of composite person like Charlotte. It's important to give someone a name, like Charlotte. She's a resident of Northern California who survived the Camp Fire, which burned nearly 154,000 acres. Like, her house where she lives with her aging mother, husband, and 3 children was destroyed. Her family farm was severely damaged. To Charlotte, this is a tragic life event that's upending her existence. To the federal government, it triggers possible eligibility for programs spread across dozens of agencies, not to mention state and local government and charities. It might mean assistance from the U.S. Department of Agriculture for the farm, a loan from the Small Business Administration, grants from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, help from the Department of Housing and Urban Development for housing, and help from the Department of Health and Human Services for health challenges. Now, we task ourselves in imagining how we can use the design system to provide a more consistent experience for Charlotte as she visits these sites and applies for assistance. This work, speaking about this person, about the needs of users coming to the federal government in times of crisis, is something that we link to in the chat, but that you see on performance.gov, a great example of sort of a cross-agency journey map and understanding how people actually interact with the federal government. I think perhaps obviously to many of us, like, this is not in discrete silos, but connected between different sites and services. And trust in government is built each time someone interacts with our services. The big message we heard as we engaged with this research and in this field, I think, is that even with the US web design system, it's still hard to build good public services on the web. And this is not just that it's still hard to build a new website from scratch. It can still be hard to even build new functionality on an existing site. Even without getting into the technical aspects, it can be easy to underestimate the amount of time and talent it can take to both understand what your audience needs to know or do, and an effective way of delivering the information and services that satisfy that need. Bigger teams have that time and talent, but there's still a gap between what they expect from the design system and what it can deliver. And what bigger teams find frustrating, smaller teams find insurmountable. We learned that even teams using USWDS are running into design challenges during the COVID-19 response. We found that many teams don't use USWDS tools, and those that do have too much custom work to do to make the design system meet their audience's needs. That said, we're all in a much better place with the design system than without it. And the effort we're putting into both guidance and design principles can be as effective as code in helping teams understand what's necessary to build effective user-centered digital services. There's no single heretofore uncovered key piece of design system functionality that's going to all of a sudden make all the hard stuff easy. But our challenge is to build what might be called like the building blocks of plain language design, solutions that help teams clarify their thoughts and focus on delivering key tasks or key messages simply and directly. This research is the biggest single research project in the history of the design system, I think. Certainly the biggest since I've been involved, many times over. We investigated the short and long-term needs for government teams responding to emergency situations to better understand design system gaps and opportunities. Over the last month, we talked to nearly 60 individuals across 32 teams, and there's still more. Is that right, Natalie? And all remote? I'm sure I'm missing some of the details here about what you've done.
It's all been remote. We've got a handful more interviews, and I would say we've reached out to over 90 people. 57 is just the ones we've talked to. And a lot of the teams brought colleagues or other folks that were really excited to talk to us. So this involved a very long and complicated spreadsheet, but we're really excited to have such interest and so many people willing to talk to us.
Yeah, it is. It's always a challenge to reach out to find to do research and to get in touch with lots of people and to get in touch with people at the scope at which we've done it is a testament to folks' real willingness to engage with this topic. And so who did we talk to? We talked to a wide range of people. We're aiming for a cross-section of roles and job functions within agencies to ensure we're considering the varied needs of people that implement and interact with the US web design system. This includes designers, engineers, managers, content managers, subject experts, and policy analysts. And perhaps one thing it seems like we're missing here is the end users themselves. Our focus was on design system customers, those familiar with the design system as a product or practitioners working on rapid response websites. Natalie, was your team able to learn much about the people using these websites from the people that build them?
Absolutely. And I'll say it was a little eye-opening too to discover the kind of huge range of people that interacted with the design system. A lot of times we think about it just being designers or engineers, and there's a whole host of other folks that interact with it in some way or that use it on the agency side. So it was great to get their perspective. From the sense of kind of end users in the public, unfortunately, as you said, we weren't able to talk with them, but they're the ones that are actually consuming. They're the reasons that the USWDS exists, is to make better customer experiences for them. So it was really reassuring to hear from these agency folks that we talked to that they really did understand their users and what they needed from their particular agencies. And I'll add that, I guess you could say, fortunately or unfortunately, we're all kind of the target users right now. There's likely something every one of us have needed from a government site during this pandemic and maybe had trouble accessing. So we did try to draw on those experiences to help hone in on what users needed. And it really did help put into perspective how critical good customer experience is, especially during an emergency.
Absolutely. We tried to focus these conversations on three major themes when we were talking to folks. The current state, how do agencies currently view the US web design system? How does it help them? What barriers do they perceive? How can USWDS capitalize on its strengths? And then of course on emergency response, what did agencies need from USWDS during their COVID-19 response efforts? And how can we better meet the customers where they're at? When I say the customers here, I think that is both folks who are using the design system as a product and people who are using sites that are built with the web design system. And then the third sort of topic here was what we might call blueprint, which is springboarding off of the current US web design system into the future. What's needed? What's nice to have? What's next? How do we get there? What can the design system do in a longer term, bigger way to continue to help support these teams? Natalie, can you talk a bit about the synthesis process that we've been using to analyze this data?
Absolutely. How much time do you have? Now,
you have 35 seconds.
I'll start by saying it was insanely complex. As you can imagine, we're talking to so many different types of people. Each interview was mapped. You can kind of see on the mural board. This is just a tiny, tiny sliver of what that mural board was. Each interview got mapped to a sticky note data point that were color coded based on the roles of the folks we talked about earlier. We then did some cross-synthesis work in a different mural, pulling together various themes, kind of doing affinity mapping, grouping things, giving them names. And then we continued kind of whittling it down into emerging ideas and really pulling up some insights and started really thinking about our observations and what we could do to help solve these problems.
Yeah, all of this is really going to be sort of tremendously useful. All of this work is going to have ongoing value for the design system and the teams that use it. This data will support our decision making really well into the future. These interviews created a wealth of information on to improve how USWDS supports agencies in emergency situations, as well as ideas to fuel the blueprint for the future of the design system. We're still doing some interviewing and our research data continues to grow. Can you speak to some of the numbers here, Natalie?
Sure. So I think, you know, in looking at these 725 data points, I think we kind of just counted up all the different sticky notes that represented the different kinds of thoughts or quotes that we got across all of our interviews. And then that whittled down into about 154 themes and topics. That's probably grown quite a bit since maybe even we did this count, but looking at those themes and really distilling those into high-level insights. And right now we've got around 80 insights or so, and we're really trying to compress that down into something that's much more manageable in terms of creating a blueprint and work going forward. So lots of problems to solve and little time to solve them. So I think, as you said, this will continue to inform future efforts, hopefully to continue improving the design system.
Yeah, do you want to get into what were, questions you might have around what we might do with this data, how we might distribute this data?
Sure. So something for folks to think about is how, how would you want to see this data? We kind of look at it as like, if we're writing notes to ourselves for the future, a year from now, 2 years from now, somebody comes in and wants to do something related to this research, how would it be best for them to digest it? Is it an Excel spreadsheet of data points? Is it a one-sheet summary of like other things we learned kind of outside the scope of this project? Is it links in GitHub to the mural boards? I don't know what that looks like. So kind of wanted to put that out to the community of what would you want to see if you were coming into a project, let's say 6 months from now, and wanted to access this research, what would be useful for you?
Yeah, I think we want to do our best to make this useful, not just for us. So we'll be reaching out to the community to sort of figure out what we're able to do to help everyone benefit from it. So, really, this is like a thank you. Many of the folks we talk to are active members of the design system community, and your continued contribution helps push the design system forward. We'll dig into our initial findings and work now, but this has only happened because of hard work and lots of folks being generous with their time and resources. So to double down on that to the folks who participated, we really appreciate it. So, enough preamble, what did we hear? So regarding the current state of the design system, we identified some strengths and some challenges. Hopefully many of these ring true to you. First, the strengths. I think that the design system has a few a few things that we know to be strong, like strong in best practices. It creates standardized, consistent, and accessible best practices to improve how the federal web functions. Expertise. We really work hard to make the hard things easy, especially with limited teams. We have strength in guidance in providing clear, well-written guidance on components and how to use them. And on mission focus, on helping agencies focus on their mission and what their audience needs in human-centered design. And as we go along, if Natalie ever has a quote or two that she's interested in calling out, she can just jump in and do that.
Sure. Yeah. On this one, I'll just say that I thought it was really interesting that folks had talked about using the design system because they didn't have a designer. So I think that's an interesting use case to really keep in mind as we're continuing to expand this. And really just a lot of people praised the amazing work that's been done on the design system thus far in terms of best practices and helping them make their sites accessible and really kind of help teach them what they should be doing.
There are a lot of different team compositions out there and a lot of different ways to approach helping them, for sure. As we look into perhaps some of the current state challenges with the design system. Integrations. Some teams have difficulty using USWDS with their content management systems like Drupal or other frameworks that are already in place. Migrations. It can be too hard to keep up to date and migrate to the newest version of the design system. Customization is a challenge. Most teams, maybe not, a lot of teams for sure don't understand the extensibility of the design system and just what you can do with it. And a constraint mindset is a challenge. It's a little bit of it's a benefit perhaps and a drawback, but I think when we're thinking about that constraint mindset of is if you see the design system as a strong limitation instead of an opportunity for a different kind of focus. There's some designers I think really appreciate constraints and some less so.
Yes, we heard a lot about finding this right balance between standardization and flexibility and customization. And it's really kind of trying to hone in on where's that sweet spot for this particular, group of folks that are going to be using it. A lot of people talked about, oh, we don't use it because we want to look different. We don't want to look just like every other government website. And they don't understand that there's ways to make USWDS not look like every other website. And then you get into the questions of, well, why should I bother using it then? And so it's really kind of helping them understand what the true value of this is. And it goes beyond just kind of the look and feel of what you can build.
Yeah, that's definitely a key balance now and moving forward. Speaking of moving forward, we have found that there is a role for USWDS in promoting effective emergency response, and we can think of our role in a few different ways. User focus. The design system can help teams focus on what their audience needs in emergency situations. Information hierarchy. We can deliver better solutions for displaying key critical information and making pages and content more immediately understandable at a glance, and give the guidance to help teams understand how to use those components along with their content teams to build better solutions. Shared content is also a key area of focus in supporting single sources of truth and lane structure, particularly for emergency response. We don't want everybody trying to solve the same problem. We want to focus the folks who know best to solve specific problems and be able to share that information out to other sources where folks would find that information. So shared content is critical. A common experience. The design system can help with a common experience to standardize common features, user flows, and content structures. And the design system can really help with mobile optimization, optimizing for people who may be displaced or without access to their primary computers, or if their primary computer is always a phone and they're just in a situation that is less comfortable and more difficult. So we'll dig a little bit into each of these potential roles and what we're doing in the near term to begin to address them.
Mm-hmm. So thinking about user focus, especially during emergency response, the mental state of our end users here is really, really an important piece of what we considered, and making things as easy as possible, just because there's so much going on during an emergency that they're going to have to think about. So really finding ways that the design system can help agencies better focus on their users, as opposed to, let's say, focus on what they think that they need to get out there or how they may be structured. So it's helping agencies kind of get out of those silos and really think about their information from the user's perspective, as opposed to, let's say, how the agency's structured.
Absolutely. And there's to some degree only so much you can do with components, but components can help you think through these solutions in a way that's really focused on presenting information clearly. So what we're working on, a process list component to streamline and clarify a step-by-step process or important actions. And a summary box component to drive attention toward important content, actions, or next steps.
Mm-hmm. And I'll add to that, I think a big piece of this was finding ways to make information kind of bite-sized. People don't have a lot of time, especially in an emergency situation. They just want to know what they need to know and move on with the next thing they need to deal with. So both of these components were ways to help agencies better do that.
Absolutely.
So thinking about information hierarchy, this is a really big one. If you think about during an emergency, everything's important, right? Especially from an agency perspective, everyone's going to think that what they need to say is the most important thing. So really helping agencies prioritize their content and give them ways of displaying that content in a hierarchy that makes sense. We heard a lot about, some sites you go to and there'd be like 6 emergency alert banners at the top, like all stacked on top of each other. And imagine as a user how scary that would be to see and how disorganized and maybe unhelpful. So really giving them ways to better organize their information and present it to the user in a way that makes sense.
So we're working on a site alert component to highlight critical messages and help build consistency across federal government sites. And we're also working on improved icon support, improving how teams can use visual cues to make it easier to find information more quickly and more consistently from site to site.
So shared content was another thing, and there's only so much that the design system can do when it comes to the actual content. We're not the ones producing the content, but we can make it easier for agencies to reference each other's content in an easier way. So we can kind of establish that single source of truth. Content's changing so frequently during an emergency, as we've seen, especially during this pandemic, and keeping all that content up to date and fresh and making sure that users have trust in what we're presenting is really, really important.
So there are a couple things that we're working on to help with this. One is what we're currently calling a preview list component, and this component would organize and display linked content, such as press releases, articles, or news. In a way, you could think of it as a news feed, but it's a little different and more than that. And also an attribution component, a way to display information that helps build trust and authority between agency content. So being able to build up the metadata around a piece of content to establish its provenance, such as its byline, its source, the date it was last updated, etc.
So this kind of comes, it's really one of the key principles of the design system from the beginning, right, is to create this common experience across government. But it's particularly important during an emergency where, I may need to log in to one agency to claim benefits for something, and I may need to log into another agency to do something else, find assistance, financial assistance, and creating that cohesive experience between all of these things really helps the user accomplish those goals faster and also increasing that trust piece as well.
Yeah, so one of the things we're doing right now is working on sign-in page template and guidance. This would collect best practices related to sign-in and help ensure a familiar experience across agencies. And what we're doing here with a sign-in page template, I think is also something we hope to continue to expand, because one of the things that builds sort of continuity and coherence across sites is, the look and feel of a button or the look and feel of a header. But another thing is like how solutions are built between components, how you might solve something by combining components together.
Exactly.
What we could think about in a template here, but it's not just about the individual atomized components. It's about how they work together to solve a need.
Mm-hmm. And I'll also add to this that this standardization greatly helps with implementation as well, right? If I'm from the developer standpoint of the ones using the design system and trying to get content out there, having that standardization really helps them move more quickly.
Absolutely.
And then of course, mobile considerations. When you think about the fact that a lot of people are going to be displaced in an emergency, mobile is kind of the go-to device. And really making sure that specifically the types of things that someone's going to need to interact with are really, really optimized for mobile. The whole design system works in mobile, but there were ways we kind of found that maybe there's things that we can tweak to really focus on the needs of a user during an emergency, specifically things like looking at a lot of data at once, and then also filling out forms on a mobile device, and how can we make that a little bit easier?
Absolutely. I think, in a way, all of our components are built to work on mobile devices, and that's certainly a key value that we bring to the design system. But I think there's always opportunities to think about mobile first and mobile friendly to be, how can we do even more to make this experience feel even more at home on mobile and meet the expectations of the mobile environment, which, making your content available and legible and readable is hopefully the low bar that we want to be able to always clear and to move beyond that. And a couple of things we're trying to do in that spirit is we're calling a radio checkbox tile component, which makes it easier to complete mobile forms by providing a larger selection area for radio buttons and checkboxes. And also we're working on table enhancements to provide better built-in solutions for data tables and mobile table display.
And I will say with table enhancements, there definitely was a lot of talk around more interactive type table elements. For now, we're kind of sticking with a few more of these kind of easier to implement solutions that aren't maybe as interactive, that are things that we could possibly explore in the future. So this is definitely
step at a time.
Yeah, exactly. This is not like, oh, these tables are going to do everything under the sun now. So
we'll save everything under the sun for 3 months from now.
Exactly, for the next team.
Yeah. So we kind of went over it a little bit, but what actually is in progress right now? We have a number of functional improvements that are actively in progress. As we mentioned, we have the sign-in page template to collect best practices and ensure a familiar experience across agencies.
And just to clarify, that is not the actual design of the template.
Correct. Yes, that's a good point, Natalie. I've put these sort of what I thought of as sort of schematic drawings of what we're thinking about to kind of get it across in a icon-y way. But we are not suggesting that your button have a key on it and no text, or that all of your text look like a lozenge.
So really what we did with the sign-in page template was kind of look at a lot of different types of best practices, things including login.gov and what some of the guidelines that they're providing to create consistency, to really help reduce that learning curve. As I said earlier, if you're having to log into one site, it shouldn't be a whole new learning curve to have to log into another site. And really helping the user focus. A lot of this was about helping the user focus on just that sign-in process. Oftentimes you'll see a sign-in and it's kind of embedded deep in a page that is hard to find where it is. So really just helping the user focus on just that aspect of it, as well as making it very mobile friendly, low bandwidth, so there's not a lot of imagery or other types of things to load so that users can access it quickly. Yeah,
so we're really working on sort of mobile first template design. We're trying to eliminate unnecessary visual clutter in this template to keep users focused on the task. We want to be able to clearly distinguish between signing in and creating an account. We want to make sure that we give folks enough information to understand how to sign in and why signing in is important. And we've been really collaborating with login.gov, who are, I would say, the experts in this field.
Mm-hmm.
We're expanding and improving icons, providing a more comprehensive, practical, and easy to use collection of icons.
So the user need here was really just being able to easily identify information on a page and helping standardize those things so that a user, when they look at one site and see a telephone, it means the same thing as when they see that icon on another government website. There are also ways to help kind of drive users towards specific actions that they need to take. So providing kind of a larger palette of icons to choose from that really would help users during an emergency.
Yeah, so we're working to determine like one recommended icon set for the design system based on legibility, breadth, and suitability. And we want to select a collection of sort of default icons for the design system that make it easier to find the right icon for the job. Mm-hmm. And we want to create guidance for using icons. So just as Natalie said, the same icon isn't used across sites to indicate different things. Right now, our icon guidance and functionality is pretty weak and doesn't provide a lot of practical guidance for going beyond the icons that we use in our components. And we know that there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of need out there for teams to use icons better and more effectively.
Mm-hmm. And this is even taking a look at all the icons used in the existing components, right? We might have an exclamation point in one component and a different exclamation point in another component. So it's even normalizing, the things across the components that are already built so that there is more of this cohesion.
Yeah, embarrassingly enough, I think if you look across the design system components, you will find probably at least 3 different closed boxes in use right now. That will change. So process list is another thing we're working on, a way to display a sequential step-by-step process or a numbered list.
So this is really just helping users easily discern that there's certain steps in a process or instructions or things that they need to follow, and that there's a linear progression between these things. So, there are a lot of ways that somebody could create this kind of a list from just the components that exist currently in the design system. But one of the things we really wanted to help our agency partners do is produce something that is easy for the users to understand. It's not over designed. A lot of times in some of our research, we saw lists that were overly complicated or didn't really make a lot of sense. So we wanted to give kind of this easy way of showing that information.
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're really trying to style the numbering of ordered lists to bring attention to sequence and show the connection between steps. We want to make a component that is simple but commands attention more than just a simple ordered list. Mm-hmm. We want to create structured elements like a section title or content or number or connector for consistency. We want this component to be able to display content in a simple way and connect to other kinds of components in the design system that might have a similar way of being built. Like this is not a step indicator, mm-hmm. but it has a certain it's related to the step indicator as a cousin, perhaps. Mm-hmm. And we want to provide flexibility in this process list by accounting for varying types of sub-content that might occur in each step. Like there might be a list, there might be hyperlinks, there could be a button, there could be an image. We don't want these things to get unwieldy, but we also know that process lists are not always they aren't always stop, drop, and roll. Mm-hmm. There's often more to it than a simple command. Next, the radio button and checkbox tiles. So this is a larger actionable selection area for radio buttons and checkboxes.
So really, this was just based on making it more mobile friendly to interact with forms. And this seemed like a kind of an easy way to do that.
Yeah, so we're building a larger and clearer tap area for an improved experience on touch devices. And honestly, as I review this work and look through it, like it's an improved experience on non-touch devices as well. Sometimes it really really finding that it improves the actionability of radio buttons and checkboxes. And we're also adding sort of a little bit of an accent color on the tile to more clearly show the selected state. We want to do really everything we can to, not overwhelm folks with making everything big and bright and overwhelming, but we can in a small way reinforce actions. So particularly if you're on a phone, particularly if you're distracted, you feel more certainty about what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think it also helps eliminate mistakes, right? To really clearly show this is what you've selected. If someone didn't mean to do that, they can make the change.
For sure. Another thing we're working on is what we're calling a preview list. So this organizes and displays linked content, such as press releases, articles, or news.
So this is really about finding, up-to-date, trustworthy information, kind of a collection of information, if you will, and to have a simple way to learn more about those topics and really keep them consistent in terms of the way that they're being displayed.
So what are we doing? We're kind of providing flexible options for the metadata that's related to each item in the list, so that they could have a title and a headline, teaser text, date, time, byline, tags, image. And we're both in what we're building in the structure and what we're developing in the guidance is we're trying to avoid UX anti-patterns such as the sort of multiple redundant read more link labels to reduce visual clutter and better enhance accessibility. Site alert for displaying critical site-wide messages.
Right, so this is something else. This is maybe one of the first things that we kind of did out of the gate was provide a way that users could quickly see critical, timely information on any page of a site, because a lot of times you may see something just on the homepage, but as we know, users don't always come through the homepage door. So we want to make sure this is something that they can see quickly and easily, but also without causing alarm and also without, stacking 6 alerts on top of each other. So helping agencies understand, like if you have more than one piece of information, this is how you can handle it.
Make every bit of text big. Everything is important.
Everything's the top priority.
So what are we doing? We're trying to build a simple alert that commands attention without adding too much complexity. We're trying to expand on our existing alert guidance on the use of color, especially to try to avoid strong negative psychological impact of alarming colors such as flame red or flame orange. And trying to include guidance to Natalie's point of avoiding stacking multiple alerts and causing confusion around what is actually important and what is actually critical. Table enhancements, built-in solutions for data tables and mobile table display.
Mm-hmm. So this is really about helping users understand a lot of complex data on a small screen. If you think about in any kind of emergency, there's going to be a lot of statistics or other types of data that are being published out there. So just making sure that it's really easy for users to understand that.
So we're trying to allow for a simple mobile-friendly table display, whether that's scrolled or stacked. We're trying to add compressed displays for data, adding optional zebra striping for better readability of dense data, and adding typography guidance, including how to use alignment well and monospace numerals for data display. summary box. A summary box is a way to display a short summary of main points, actions, or next steps.
Right, so this is just a way of kind of grouping and highlighting key information at the top of a page. So for instance, if it's a medical article, here's the key things that have changed, or if it's, this is guidance around, when to get tested for COVID, here's the guidance, 1, 2, 3 that you need to see about that kind of at the top, and then you have the main content of the page underneath.
So what we're doing is creating a simple container that can accept different types of content, but really encouraging the use of short scannable lists. And I think with a lot of these components, and with any component really in the design system, but particularly here, we're talking about a combination of the component itself and its guidance as a way to, it structures the page and it puts a page together, but it begins even more, I think, to structure your thinking and to help teams think about how to structure their message.
Right, what really is most important, and let's get that up top.
Yeah. So that's a lot. And Natalie can walk us through a bit of our research and development process for each of these components.
It was a pretty in-depth process where we did a lot of desk research, landscape analysis, looked at current implementations, what did the current design system have to say about these things, and what were some best practices from other design systems. Then doing some lo-fi sketches, we talked to subject matter experts or pulled things from our previous research and interviews around those types of components. And then we did a lot of internal design critiques and also asked for feedback from the USWDS community. And then we used all of that to kind of write the guidelines and assess those as well.
There's a lot, and this work is ongoing, and we'll be hearing more about it through the public Slack and through other sort of community channels as we move forward with it. So thank you sort of so much for helping me introduce this work, Natalie, and thank you to both the Accelerator team and the core team for working so hard and so well in this short period of time to move this work forward.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of stuff. So now, what's next? Over the next month, we're going to continue testing these components and prepping them for release. So look out for calls for feedback in the USWDS public Slack channel or in like the UX community of practice. We're going to be releasing these emergency response related components in December. So we're not sitting on these. We're not taking a long time with it. We're getting these things out ASAP. After that, we'll be releasing the beta development work that's currently paused. But this new work comes first. And along with that, planning for larger scale changes based on our research. This research has been super helpful for helping influence some of the things we can do right now, but it's not just focused on the right now. We're going to be using this to develop the 2021 roadmap and major themes we intend to address in the year ahead. And so all of this is in the service of putting together the blueprint for the next major version of the design system. We definitely don't have it already figured out and ready to talk about or certainly unveil. This is something that we're starting now, and it's important to us that we work with you. Connection, collaboration, continuity, these are bound to be themes of any new work that we're starting on. And we want to be sure that we're listening and that we're starting with the needs of the people who use the design system and use the products built with the design system as we plan for the future. So that big work starts now. So yeah, I mean, this has really been a year. And we know it's been a challenge, and we appreciate all your hard work. Perhaps it's one of the smaller lessons to learn from this year, but it's still meaningful to us. We still have a long way to go to realize the full promise of our design system. we're really looking forward to looking forward. So onward. Thank you for being such a thoughtful, supportive community, and be safe out there. And with that, I will head to my next slide here and head to the chat for what Q&A we can do in 2 minutes. Oh, I really timed it well.
I do want to interject. There are a couple people that are asking how to join the public Slack. I don't know if they're succinct.
Yes. Check out digital.gov/communities/USWDS. So look at the communities page of Digitalgov. We don't have it in on this page, but hold on, to get into that. I think all that information is there. It's also at the bottom of our design system. Every design system page. I think there's a link to more information on joining the Slack. So now, where's my chat? All right. So let me find my messages. Is that the only question right now?
No, somebody had asked about content syndication as well. That is something we discussed quite a bit. It's something that is certainly on our radar. I don't think that's something we're going to be addressing with this particular project, but it is something that we heard about as being a challenge.
We have a question from Erica Bauer, who'd love to hear more about the mural collaboration and the way you've been workshopping and working together. This is a good Natalie question.
Yeah, so a lot of that was, we all kind of were in the mural. We divided up the interviews quite a bit since there were so many of them. So kind of one person from each interview was taking notes, and then they were the ones that went in and added those stickies. It was a lot of just kind of collaborative. We would talk through things. There was a lot of work that we did individually on the interviews that we had led to kind of group things and start just kind of figuring out what does this all mean. I think it was a challenge. It was something, I think, a little bit of an experiment in terms of how are we going to organize and synthesize this much information. So definitely don't know if we did it the best way possible. If anyone has any other, suggestions on how they've kind of synthesized this much information, certainly open to hearing about that. But yeah, and we did do like daily. We actually have a daily UX stand up where we kind of talk about things. The other piece I don't think I mentioned is after our interviews, we do a regroup with everyone on the interview to kind of highlight, here's key things that we heard, making sure we were in alignment around what we heard, and starting to pull away like, oh, that was a great quote, or that was something we want to make sure we highlight.
And to add to some of that, Erica, if you're not already familiar with the 18F method cards, Google that. Yeah. And it's like methods. I can't even remember, but Google 18F method cards. They give a lot of good overviews of techniques for doing collaborative design and synthesis work.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say one of the trickiest things about this, in addition to just the volume, was there were a lot of things you could kind of slice and dice different ways, right? So the one piece of information, depending on kind of how you framed it, might point to one thing or might point to another. So it was a lot of just conversation around what do we think is best, given the information that we have and given like kind of the quantity of people that said this thing.
Thanks for the link to the methods cards, Robert. So here we are, we're 2 minutes over time, and I may as well thank you for joining the call today. Next month, we'll be looking at these emergency response components. And you see the links here in the chat, but I encourage you to join the community in the public Slack. You can follow that digital.gov link if it's in there, digital.gov/communities/USWDS. That'll be changing soon. We're going to be pulling a lot of that communities information onto our own website. this is maybe hopefully the last month we'll be giving a Digitalgov link to all of this, but stay tuned for that as well. We want to be managing more of our community resources from our own website. So thanks so much for listening. There was a lot to go through today and a lot going on. Thank you so much for Natalie for talking it through with me. I really appreciate her support with this.
Wish we had more time.
Absolutely. All right, take care, everyone. Be well.
Thanks.